so much for today's class is a peanut butter cake, and it's absolutely delicious. I actually made it for my brother's birthday cake, and everyone was raving about it. So I was like, this is going to be the perfect class for my next Michael's. So I'm going to go over some of the supplies that we're using. I have a mixer here, and if you don't have a stand mixer, you can definitely use a bowl and a hand mixer. I have peanut butter. This is a cup of peanut butter, and I'm using the smooth peanut butter. I'm going to go over the amounts as we're making it again, but just I want to give a quick overview of everything I have on the table. So I have a cup of peanut butter here. I have a teaspoon of water. I have 8 tablespoons of butter that's room temperature, and the buttercream icing mix. So if you guys haven't heard of the buttercream icing mix or have used it yet, I strongly encourage you to try it out. It's absolutely delicious. It cuts making buttercream from scratch the time down like crazy. All you have to do is put this into your bowl, add some butter and water, and whip it up, and you're good to go within minutes. And it's kind of foolproof because it's not going to break on you. It's very heat stable, which is amazing. And it mixes up so quickly. So this is definitely one of my favorite Satin products, and I'm really excited to share it with you guys today. And hopefully you guys can try it out as well. So this is the main part of our buttercream today, right here. I also have a turntable. This is going to be so that when we're covering our cakes with the buttercream, we can easily turn it and smooth out our cakes without having any issues of reaching different places. I also have, this is like a slip mat grip type of thing that I put on my turntable to help grip my cake board to the turntable. If you don't have one of these, this is actually like a cabinet liner. If you don't have one of these though, you can just put a little piece of tape on the bottom of your cake board and place it down. It just helps hold it in place if your cake isn't heavy enough. So I have that. And then I have a spatula for scraping the sides and transferring the buttercream to a piping bag and piping and onto the cake. And then I also have an offset spatula. It's also just, it's an angled spatula. So this is going to be great for like spreading the buttercream in between the layers and on top and around the cake. And then some people call these a bunch scraper, or an icing smoother. And this is going to help us get those really smooth edges along the side of the cake. I also have peanut butter cups. We're going to use these for the top of our cakes. You can use the mini ones, or you can cut up larger ones into quarters. So that's what I did here. And then I also have more peanut butter on the side. This is going to be for our drip. So I have about a half a cup here. And again, I'll go over the amounts when we're actually using them. And then I have some bowls on the side over here for if I have to scrape my spatula off in between icing with the cake because of the crumbs and all of that. I have my delicious cake layers and some piping bags and piping tips. I also have a star piping tip in my bag and a pair of scissors as well. And then I also have some wet paper towels and dry paper towels because we're going to want to make sure that our spatula and icing smoother is very clean in between pass-throughs when we're smoothing out our cake. So I actually have cake layers from our local grocery store, which is great. It's a great hack if you didn't know that you could do this, but you can go to the bakery at your local grocery store and say that you want to place an order for plain cake layers, and they give them to me, and they're already leveled and they're already cut like in thin layers, which is great. So I originally put on this class 3 layers for cake, but today I'm actually going to be working with around 6 small skinny layers because these were already cut in half. Okay, so let's get started. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask them in the chat, and I'm excited. This is going to be a very fun class and a very delicious class. So first we're going to start with the buttercream. So the buttercream icing mix has some ratios on the side of the packaging. And if you go on satinice.com, you can even find other recipes for different flavors, for different consistencies, depending on what project you're working on. Today, we're going to be working with the recommended recipe because it's perfect for filling layers, crumb coating, and even piping. So that's the standard go-to for me. And like I said, all we have to do is add butter and water and it's going to be ready in minutes. And today we're adding peanut butter to it to make it a peanut butter buttercream. So that's the beauty of this. It's totally customizable. You can add food color, you can add flavored extracts, you can even add like fruit concentrates or nut butters, if like almond butter or Nutella, that would be really delicious as well. Okay, so when you first open this, you're just going to take the top off and you're going to see that it's in a bag. This is also similar to how our fondant comes in the pails. The bag makes sure that it stays fresh, and it's a dough-like consistency. So it's not like normally when you have to make homemade buttercream, you're dealing with powdered sugar and the powders fly everywhere. This is more of a dough-like shortening consistency. So it's going to stay put in the bowl. It's not going to go anywhere, and it mixes up very, very fast. So first we're just going to transfer this into your bowl. I like to just squeeze the sides of the bag to kind of like break it up into half portions. Today I'm working with the 2-pound pail and I'm going to use the whole thing for this buttercream today. If you wanted to, you could work with a pound at a time. That's up to you depending on your project and how much you need. So I'm just going to put this whole thing in my bowl, but I just broke it in half just to portion it out easier. And then I'm going to get rid of this bag. And what's great is that if you have leftover buttercream, you can store it in this pail because it's an airtight pail, which is great. So I'll keep this on the side for later. Next, we are going to add our butter in, and the butter is room temperature. I cut it in half. You don't even have to do that. And I'm using half a cup, which is 8 tablespoons. So we're just going to dump that in there. And then I'm just going to raise the bowl up. Again, if you're using a regular KitchenAid mixer, you probably won't have to do that. Make sure it's locked and in place. And if you're using a bowl and a hand mixer, that's totally fine too. That will work great. So I'm just going to start mixing on medium speed just to slowly start to incorporate the butter and the icing mix together. So I noticed that my butter is sticking to the paddle attachment, so I'm just going to scrape that down. And you're going to want to scrape the sides of your bowl here and there to make sure that everything's getting incorporated evenly. So I just have to move that butter off the paddle, and I'm going to start it again. Okay, so at this point, my butter and icing mix is already incorporated together. That is very, very fast. Normally, if you're working with powdered sugar, you'd have to stop multiple times, really make sure that you're getting at the bottom of the bowl and scraping and making sure the powder is not flying everywhere and making a mess. So if you were making just homemade, if you were just making this as vanilla, it already has the vanilla flavoring in it. You would just have to add a little bit of your liquid next, and then it would be done. But today we're turning this into a peanut butter frosting. So at this point, I'm going to start adding my peanut butter. I'm working with about a cup of peanut butter, and I'm just going to slowly put this in there and just see how it all incorporates, because I might not have to use the full cup. So I'm just going to put that in there, turn it on again on medium speed. Okay. I am going to add the rest of this in. And then place this to the side. Give this another stir, and then I'm going to really scrape the edges and the bottom to make sure everything is evenly incorporated. Okay, so now I'm just going to scrape the rest of this off my spatula, scrape the bottom of the bowl, the sides of the bowl, just to make sure everything's incorporated together. And at this point, you can also add your water if you need it. It depends on your climate, your environment. I mean, the peanut butter added some moisture to this, plus the butter, so I might not have to add my water, but I might add just a little bit so that it spreads evenly and smooth on the cake. So I'm just scraping the bottom. And then we'll give it another mix, and I'll add some of my water. I have a teaspoon of water measured for mine. And like I said, it depends on what you're doing. If you're just smoothing this on the edge of the cake and filling a cake, you can even make it a little, you can add a little bit more water depending on the consistency that you need if you're not piping it. If you need a stiffer buttercream, you're going to add less moisture. So I'm just going to put this on again to give it another couple minutes to mix in. And I'm going to add some water. So some tips on the buttercream as well. If you want it to be extra fluffy, you can continue to mix this on high for a little bit longer, and it will add air into the buttercream and make it fluffier. We also have a recipe online for an extra buttery buttercream, so you can add even more butter if you want. That helps tone down the sweetness as well. You can use salted butter or unsalted butter, whichever you prefer. If you prefer a less sweet buttercream, I would opt for the salted butter. But today we also have peanut butter in here, so this is going to really taste delicious. I'm just going to mix it a little bit more to make it a little fluffier. Okay, so now I'm going to get this all off of the paddle attachment. I'm actually going to remove the bowl from the mixer. If you guys have any questions, just put them in the chat, whether it's about the buttercream icing mix or making the buttercream, let me know. So I'm just scraping off the extra buttercream that's on the paddle attachment to make sure we get all of this for our cake. It smells so delicious. I'm a huge peanut butter lover, especially peanut butter and chocolate. And when I was making this cake, I was originally going to do chocolate layers, but my brother wanted vanilla, and it turned out being so delicious.
So we have a question. Sheila's making 2 cakes. Is there a knife icing in there for 2, or do they need to buy more?
I would recommend, well, it depends on the size of the cakes that you are making, but it's better to be safe and make enough buttercream. It depends how much you're putting in between the layers, how much you're coating on the sides, if you're piping things. So I would definitely get another one. We also have it in the 4-pound. So you can get the 4-pound buttercream icing mix as well. But like I said, better safe than sorry. And then if you have extra buttercream, you can always freeze it, which is great.
We have another question, but from Greg. He said he used 1 cup of peanut butter, but the frosting doesn't taste very peanut buttery. Is he able to add more without kind of over moisturizing the buttercream
Yeah,
frosting?
I say definitely add more to your liking. If you want it to be more peanut buttery taste, for sure, you can add more. And then if you didn't already add your water, maybe you might want to add less water. You can kind of see how it works out. And if you ever did put too much water in your buttercream icing mix, you could always add a little bit of powdered sugar if you needed to thicken it back up, but that's not likely. So what I'm doing now is I'm just scraping the sides, and when you're mixing the buttercream, you're whipping a lot of air into it, and you're going to have a lot of air pockets. So I hope you can see this, but you'll see like little air pockets on the buttercream, and you'll get that when you're smoothing your cake. So what I like to do is I kind of like to just go back and forth, kind of slapping the buttercream, and this gets rid of some of the air bubbles. And I like to scrape it to one side, kind of smooth it out a little bit, just to get rid of some of those air bubbles. It's definitely an arm workout. Okay. So our buttercream is ready. And now it's time to start decorating the cake. So, like I said earlier, I actually got my cake layers from my local grocery store at their bakery. All I did was I asked for some plain cake layers in vanilla flavor, and that's what they gave me. I asked for 3 layers, but what they do is they have their layers already cut in half thin. So realistically, this would really be 1 layer that comes out of your cake pan, like these together, or maybe even a little taller, and that's fine. But what they did, they cut theirs in half. So I said 3 layers for this project, but mine is going to be 6 thin layers because they cut their layers in half. So the first step is to make sure your cake board is on your turntable. If you don't have a turntable, it's okay. It's a lot easier if you do, because you don't have to then spin like your plate around when you're trying to smooth out a cake. So the turntable definitely makes things a lot easier. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our angled spatula, and I like to just place a little bit of the buttercream in the center, kind of to act like glue for the first cake layer. So I just smear a little bit on there. And before I also do this, I like to prep the layers. I didn't have to do this today because the layers were already thin and pretty much leveled off. But when the cake comes out of the oven, a lot of times there's a dome on the top because it rises. So you just want to take either a serrated knife or a cake leveler and just make sure all your cake layers have a nice flat edge. This is going to help make sure that your cake is level and to make sure it kind of has like nice straight edges. So that always helps. So I'm just going to, another tip that I have, I forgot to mention, this is a big one for me. Before I decorate my cakes, I like to put my cake layers in the freezer once they're already cooled, because this helps them not be as crummy and as delicate. So these are thin layers, so these are definitely delicate. So I had these in the freezer before. So I'm just going to carefully pick this up, place it down on top of that buttercream on top of the cake board. And then at this point, I'm just gonna add a little bit more buttercream for in between the layers. Since I do have more layers, I'm not going to go too heavy on the buttercream in between the layers because I need to have enough buttercream for the cake. So what I'm doing is I just dolloped, I eyeballed an amount. Some people like to measure with like an ice cream scooper or a cupcake scooper. But I just like to eyeball it and I just spread it evenly. And I just go slow. I try not to pick up the crumbs from the cake underneath the icing. And you want to make sure that this layer is as even as it can be as well, because you're going to be placing the other layers on top of this. Okay. So next, I'm just going to pick up my next layer, place it on there. And I like to just give it a light press down just to make sure if there's any air pockets in there, they'll come out, because the air that can get stuck in between the layers can cause like bulges on your icing that you might find later on. So I just like to make sure that there's no air, but not pressing too hard that you're going to break the cake in half or damage it in any way. I'm just making sure my hands are clean in between this process because of the crumbs. So I'm going to add a little bit more buttercream. So like I said before, I'm working with layers that I had in the freezer, and this does help the crumbs kind of stay locked in. But as they thaw, they definitely start to get flimsier. So my cake layers are definitely starting to thaw, but that's okay. Okay. And then what I have over here are extra bowls because, and right now it's fine because I'm working in between the layers, but as I'm working on the outside after I do a crumb coat, I'm going to want to make sure that this spatula is cleaned off from any crumbs, because on the outside layer, you definitely don't want to see any crumbs. So later on, you'll see me scraping the excess icing off into this bowl if it catches any crumbs. I'm going to add the next layer. Press it down just a little bit. Again, this is to make sure that any air that might be stuck in between the layers makes its way out. I'm just adding a thin layer of buttercream in between each layer just because I have more layers than expected. So I want to make sure I have enough buttercream to go around the whole cake. And it's okay if when you're buttercreaming the layers, it's okay if it's starting to go out along the edges, because later on we'll take the spatula and we'll smooth it out, and that kind of acts as the crumb coat. Okay, so I'm adding my next layer, and you just want to make sure they're all going on evenly. Add another coating of buttercream. The other good thing about this buttercream is that it does have a subtle vanilla flavor, which is fantastic because then you don't have to add vanilla extract, and vanilla extract can get expensive. So this already has that in there, but it's just enough so that you can add other flavors as well. Okay, this might be the last layer that I add. Okay, so this is going to be the last layer I add just because I want to make sure I have enough buttercream for the outside and the top of the cake. So what I do for my last layer, and this is obviously cut because of the way they cut their layers, but you can flip your layer over so you have the bottom edge. and that edge is going to have the nice sharp edges. So I like to flip my layer over and make it so the bottom is on the top. And that's going to make it so that you have a nice straight edge. So again, I'm just pressing down a little bit, get any air out. And then the next step is that we're just going to kind of smooth out the sides and it's kind of like a crumb coat. If I was doing this in my house, I would definitely put it in the refrigerator after I do a crumb coat to let them really lock in so that my final layer of buttercream goes on smoothly. But we're not going to do that today. I'm just going to move from the crumb coat to the actual final coat. So right now, I'm just going to add a little bit of buttercream to the top of this cake to definitely lock in these crumbs on the top. So I'm just smoothing it out. The smoother that your crumb coat is as well, it will be easier for you on your final coat. So what I'm doing to get this smooth is, and here I'm going to scrape this, my spatula on the edge of this just to make sure it gets clean. But what I'm doing is I'm placing the angled spatula on top, just like this flat. I'm not putting a lot of pressure, just enough. And at the same time, I'm not even moving this hand, I'm moving the turntable and it's guiding the spatula to move and smooth out. This takes a lot of practice, so don't get frustrated if it's not working out for you. You'll get it. It does take time. I remember when I first started decorating cakes, I always used to see people getting the smoothest edges on cakes, and it's okay if you don't. So now I'm just going to go around the edges. If we go to the other view, you'll see what I'm talking about, where the frosting is kind of pooling out from the sides. That's because we put enough on the inside as we were filling the layers. So I'm just going to use that frosting to coat the outside of the cake layers to lock in those crumbs. And if you have to add more, you can always do that too. So I'm just gently going around, filling in these gaps and locking in as much crumbs as I can. Some of the crumbs are falling off a little bit, that's okay. So I am gonna add a little bit more buttercream. I'm gonna put it in this bowl so it's reserved for my crumb coat. So if any crumbs get in there, it doesn't matter. So I'm just lightly coating the sides of the cake. To make sure that all the crumbs get locked in. And the crumb coat starts to look like the naked style cake. A lot of people like to have those style cakes. I'm noticing that my layer is a little bit, no. The cake layer is a little bit lopsided, but that's okay. All right. So just continue going around the cake. And locking in those crumbs. What I mean by locking in the crumbs is the icing, the crumbs stick to the icing and then they'll stay there when you do your final coat. They don't have anywhere to fall or stick to. So I just have to add a little bit more. And when I'm doing the sides, I just have the spatula flat on the edge of the cake. And again, I'm just spinning my turntable. I'm letting that do the work. Okay, so at this point, my crumbs are all locked in. I'm just smoothing it out a little bit so that it's easier for me for my final layer. And like I said earlier, at this point, I would stick my cake in the fridge to really solidify this layer. So that nothing comes up on when I do my final layer. But today, I'm just gonna go for it and we'll do the final coating. So on the edge, as you're scraping the sides, your frosting is gonna kind of rise up to the top edge. And then you can use your offset spatula to smooth out the top. So what I do is I start from the top and I either drag toward me, depending on which side of the cake I'm on. I'm either dragging toward me or dragging across from me, far from me. So I'm starting from this edge. So I'm just going to lightly hover over it, drag forward on the cake. This is just going to make the edges straight. So I'm just going around the whole cake. To make sure all those edges are smooth. Okay. So now I have my extra frosting here that has crumbs in it. You can eat that if you want, or just put it to the side. I'm gonna put mine to the side so that I don't use it again. And now I'm going to wipe this spatula because I want to make sure all the crumbs are off of it for my final coating. Okay. All right, so at this point, you just want to make sure your work area is nice and clean. There's no crumbs to get stuck. I might have crumbs on the outside of my cake because of the fact that I can't put mine in the fridge, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so now I'm just going to give this buttercream just another stir. Move it out a little bit. Okay. Now I'm going to start on the top. So I'm just going to dollop some frosting on the top of my cake, and I'm going to start smoothing the top. And the reason I want to start smoothing the top first is because, like we did with the crumb coat, the icing starts to shift up as you smooth it, and that makes it easier so that you could just scrape the top, but you want to make sure your top is already nice and smooth before you do that. So I'm just going to start spreading this along the top. Nice and gently and evenly. So first I'm just maneuvering it around with the spatula, and then now I'm gonna make sure my spatula is nice and clean. And now I'm just going to lay the spatula flat onto the cake, light pressure, and I'm just going to start spinning the turntable. And I'm just letting that do the work. So you keep doing this until it's nice and smooth, and then you can scrape off any excess icing that comes off. And the reason you don't want to press down too hard is because you'll end up scraping off all the icing that you just added to the cake. So another thing that I like to do when I decorate my cakes with buttercream and want a smooth finish is that I actually, once I have all the frosting on and I'm finishing smoothing, I like to run the hot water on the sink, and I like to put the spatula underneath it to get this nice and hot. And then I wipe it dry, and then I use that to smooth out the buttercream because it kind of melts it a little bit and it gets any like divots or air bubbles out, and it works great. So let's finish icing the sides. So I'm just going to add a little bit more frosting to my spatula and just start adding it to the sides. You can add as much as you want. You definitely want to be on the you don't want to be on the conservative side with it. You want to put more because you will end up scraping some off when you start smoothing your cake. And also you want to make sure that you're putting an even amount as you go along the whole entire cake. Because when you smooth it out, you'll notice there are areas that might not be smooth. And I'll show you an example of that when we start to really smooth out the edges. Sometimes it's hard to get on the bottom, so just scrape it down on there and then continue to move around. And if you don't want to have a perfectly smooth cake, you don't have to do that either. You can use the spatula to make cool textures in the frosting. That's always fun. So again, I'm just making sure that the coating that I'm putting on the outside of this cake is even on the bottom, on the top, on the sides. Because when we go to smooth it, we'll see areas that have like less frosting and areas that have more. And the areas that have less, you just add more and you re-smooth it, and then it will all blend together. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but there's areas like right here, these little, like, it looks like air pockets. That's where there's like less frosting. So I just add a little bit more there. I'll add a little bit more there. And then when you do your final scrape through, it kind of evens everything out. Okay, so now I have my cake fully coated, and now is the time where I'm going to take my icing smoother or bench scraper, whichever you like to call it. Make sure it's nice and clean. And I have it just right up against the cake, not completely digging it in. It's just resting on the edge of the cake. And like I did with the offset spatula before, I'm just going to hold it there and let the turntable do the work. Not pressing too hard because you don't want to scrape too much icing off. And you're just going to go around and you're going to notice that there's icing being pulled off. That's normal. So that came off as I'm smoothing the edges, and we're going to just continue to keep doing pass-throughs. And then you can just add since we're not catching any crumbs with this, since we already did our crumb coat, you can just add whatever frosting that comes off back off to your bowl. And again, with each pass through, just make sure that your bench scraper is nice and smooth or nice and clean, because it needs to be for the cake edges. So at this point, this is when I like to run my bench scraper under warm water and then wiping it dry, because it really just helps smooth out the edges. So there's an area here along the edge that looks like it's a little like indented because it needs more frosting. It's not even. So I'm just going to add a little bit more there. And I'm just going to look around my cake where there might be other areas that might need that extra frosting before I do another pass through. And don't get frustrated if the cake isn't getting super smooth. It takes practice and patience. And like I said, if you don't even have to do a smooth edge cake. You can use the spatula to make really cool textures. And it will look just as good. Okay, so I'm just going to do another pass through, making sure my offset spatula, my bench scraper is nice and clean. Holding it upright, not a lot of pressure, just up against the cake. And I'm just slowly turning my turntable. And then when I'm finishing, when I'm taking off the bench scraper from the cake, I kind of continue moving it along the cake once I stop turning the turntable so that there's not much of a line. You could probably go on and on and on and keep doing this because you want it absolutely perfect, but sometimes it is what it is. I'm just going to do this like one more time. Okay. So now what I have to do is make the edges flat. So like I said, we smoothed out the top earlier. And so now we have this extra edge up here from smoothing out the frosting on the sides. So now I'm just going to just pass it through, pass it to the top of the cake. Pass it over the top, and it's going to give you those clean edges. And definitely make sure you're cleaning the offset spatula after each pass through. And if you want to do it from the other side, you can do it from the other side and you can pull toward you. Whichever way is more comfortable for you. Sometimes I like to do it this way so I can see. Okay, so now my top is smooth, the sides are smooth, and now it's time for the peanut butter drip, which is so easy. I'm just gonna put my buttercream to the side. Clean off my spatula, clean up my surface a little bit. Okay, so for the peanut butter drip, I have about a half a cup of peanut butter here in a microwave safe bowl. Mine's a measuring cup, and I have a microwave behind me, and I'm just going to put this in the microwave for about 30 seconds, give it a stir, and see if it needs any more. So I'm just gonna place it in the microwave for 30 seconds. And the goal is to make the peanut butter liquidy so that it can drip and run down the cake. So you don't have to add anything to it. The heat just thins it out and then it's gonna run nicely down the cake. First, we're gonna cover the top and then we can transfer the melted peanut butter into a piping bag and then make precise strips. So mine's about to stop. And I think that's actually enough. Yep, this is perfect. So it's nice and thinned out now. This is the perfect consistency for a drip. Depends on your microwave settings. If you have a stronger microwave, you might have to do less than 30 seconds or depending on how much peanut butter is in your cup. So first, I just want to do a coating on the top. So I'm just going to pour just a little bit on top and I'm going to smooth this out with the spatula. You want to save some for your drips. So people do drip cakes different ways. If you wanted to, and you wanted it just to be like a fun, loose drip, you could pour this all on top of the cake and just let it flow down. I want to kind of plan out where I put the drips. So I'm just putting a nice thin layer on the top, making this smooth. Adding a little more, making sure I'm not adding too much that it's going to go running off the edge though. I just want to bring it just to the outer edge where we'll start the drips. And if you don't want to use a piping bag or don't have one, you could definitely use like a spoon and just make the drips that way as well. So I'm just bringing this to the outer edge, just enough so that it's not going to start dripping off the edge, but so it covers the top. Okay, and then what I did last time when I made this, I used my offset spatula and I kind of made like a cool rounded texture. So what I did was I just kind of held it on an angle. And again, I let the turntable do the work and I just start spinning and I kind of make a swirl on the top. Right now, my peanut butter might be a little too melty still to hold the swirl, but now I'm going to transfer the melted peanut butter to a piping bag and we're gonna start our drip. So a hack to do this is you can place your piping bag into a tall glass and wrap the sides down. This way you don't have to hold it. Or you could just, I like to put my hand underneath, pull the sides down, and then I'm just gonna pour this peanut butter in here. If you use the cup method, it's easier because you have both of your hands and you can scrape all the excess out of the cup. I think I have enough.
We have a question from Sheila. She asked, what do we do if the peanut butter isn't melting? Do you have any tips?
I would place it back into the microwave and you could just do 15 to 30 second intervals. Make sure that you have the smooth peanut butter and that it's not the chunky one. So, and then if you guys have any questions, just please go ahead and ask. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut a little bit off the tip of this piping bag, just enough to make skinny drips. I don't want them to be too fat. So I'm just going to cut about like ½ inch up from the tip of the bag. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to start from the top edge and you're just going to squeeze and watch the peanut butter just drip down. And for longer drips, you can just squeeze more. For shorter drips, you squeeze less. And you just make your way around, spinning the turntable to make it easy. So again, for longer drips, I'm squeezing for longer. For shorter drips, I'm squeezing for shorter. And you can do them from as far apart as you want from each other, as close as to each other as you want. And there's the drips. And at this point, the peanut butter on the top has started to solidify just a little bit. So I'm going to go back up there and just make the swirl again. So what I did was I just started on the outer edge, pressing down a little bit with the spatula angled, and I just go around and I just make a swirl on the top. So there we go. The drips are done. The top is done. And next we're going to just pipe some dollops on top of the cake to finish it off and add some peanut butter cups. So I also have another piping bag here and I have a star piping tip in it. I didn't cut the top yet because I want to show you guys how to do it without having the piping tip fall through the bag. So I already have the piping tip in the bag and I'm pushing it down as far as it can go so I can kind of see where I have to cut the bag so that the end of the piping tip will show just enough and that it's not going to fall through the bag. So I see here where to cut. So I'm just going to make a small little cut there and then I'm going to move the piping tip back up in the bag. And then where I made my cut, I'm just going to cut straight across. And then press down just enough so that your piping tip is through the hole. And now we can fill our piping bag. So I'm just, as you fill your piping bag, you just want to make sure that you're pushing the buttercream down far enough so you can fit all the buttercream in there. And then just squeeze the buttercream down just enough so that it starts to get to the edge of the tip. And then you're ready to start piping. So the last time I did this cake, I did kind of a rope style piping on top, or you could just do regular buttercream dollops all around. But I think I'm going to do the rope style again. So what I did was I held my piping bag kind of on the side, start squeezing the buttercream, and you kind of just start making these little swirls as you go around the cake. Use two hands if you need to, and then spin. So I'm holding my piping bag on an angle, and I'm just making little swirls, and it's creating like a nice piped rope. And you do this all the way until you meet the other side. So you could do that, or you could do little dollops on top, whichever you like. And then now's the time where you can add your peanut butter cups. I didn't have mini peanut butter cups, so this time I cut larger peanut butter cups into quarter size, and you can just place them along the top edge of the cake. You can add as many as you want. I'm sure people would love to add a lot so that every slice gets one.
We have a tip from AS. They asked, what tip was used for the border?
I used a star tip. Let me see what the number was. This is the Atico, and it's 824, but it's your standard star tip.
Gary says it looks beautiful.
Thank you. I can't wait for the time that it's to eat this. Can't wait. It looks amazing. Okay, so I had about like 8 pieces of peanut butter cups, and I just put them all along the edge, and the cake's done. So again, you can do this with a bunch of other flavors. I really want to try this out with Nutella. I think that would be really delicious. Do you guys have any more questions? Let me know. If not, I want to thank you guys all for joining this class today. It was a lot of fun, and I definitely hope that you guys give the Satin Ice Buttercream Icing Mix a try. You saw how easy it was to make, and it tastes absolutely delicious. You can customize it by flavor, color, consistency, whatever works for you. And yeah, and then I also want to make sure to tell you guys to sign up for my next class in September. We're going to be making woodland fun and animal toppers. So yeah, thank you guys again for joining, and have a great night.